7 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Monday, June 9th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights, hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Colorado's blue, America's red. It all meets right here. Los Angeles is on fire. That's what we're going to talk about this hour. Freeways blocked. Waymos. Bill, I got to talk. I mean, this seems like lighting R2-D2 on fire.
Yeah.
To get your frustration out. A Waymo. Like, what did the Waymo do to you?
Yeah. But then again, we light things on fire a lot. We like that. Just wait until one of the NBA teams wins a championship. More fires. That's what we do. We light things on fire. Couches, dumpsters.
I don't feel like Denverites
cars.
do that when we win championships.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Do we
Oh, yeah,
still?
we do.
I don't really? With Broncos, like Super Bowl wins and the Nuggets? I don't remember lighting things on fire.
I watched Bronco fans light couches and dumpsters on fire during the Super Bowl wins.
Did they?
Watch them. Yeah. Where I was, they were doing it about a block and a half away from Larimer Street. Yeah, so it was downtown. Not like neighborhoods, nothing else. It was.
Yeah.
The question I had during that entire thing is, where the hell did the couch come from? Because again, it's all condos and some other stuff around. I'm like, did you bring this down the elevator? I mean, what happened? How did you get the couch? All of a sudden, the couch just appeared in the corner, and then it was lit on fire a little while later. Again, I want to know how that couch got there. It's still bothering me to this day. I have no idea. Just couch shows up and then it's on fire.
Well, there are protests against immigration raids and National Guard deployments that are taking place in Los Angeles. We're going to get the latest from Rory O'Neill on that coming up. You're not going to want to miss it. 8 o'clock hour, Congressman Gabe Evans is joining us on hearings that are going to take place in Washington, D.C. on growing anti-Semitism. If you remember, it was just 8 days ago that the Molotov cocktail firebombing of Jews in Boulder took place. So how is Congress going to respond to growing anti-Semitism? Gabe Evans joining us 8 o'clock hour. And then David Dearson, an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, on a lawsuit that's been launched against the city of Denver, an award-winning Denver home builder suing the city in federal court over the city's, quote, inclusionary zoning program. Red T Homes, committed to building sustainable, affordable housing in the area, faces exorbitant fees to pay for Denver's lack of affordable housing, a problem the home building company didn't cause. So why are they having to pay for it? We'll get the latest on that. So lots to cover today. Most importantly, your phone calls and texts. Here's the phone line for the show, 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971, or we have a text line, 720-819-5115, 720-819-5115. Now let's do news and comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good morning, Monday, 54 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 79 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story.
When I look at the people who are out there doing the violence, that's not the people that we see during the day who are legitimately out there exercising their First Amendment rights and to be able to express their feelings about the immigration enforcement issue. These are people who are all hooded up. They've got a hoodie on. They've got face masks on. They're people who do this all the time.
Yep, L.A. Police Chief Jim McDonnell, he knows these are paid protesters at night, especially at night, trying to create as much chaos as possible and then hope that some nut job comes up and shoots somebody and kills somebody. Then they can blame it all on 47. Maxine Waters goes out to gin things up, hoping her wig doesn't fall off in the process. And Newsom, Governor Newsom, that is, pushes the narrative. Trump evil. Look at this fascist federal government. Colonel Kurt Schlichter was on the Chris DeGaulle show right before we went on this morning. I think he's spot on here. He lives in Southern California.
It's a very small area. It's very remote. They want to give the impression to the rest of the United States that all of Los Angeles is in chaos. It isn't. We're going through our lives normally here and in 99% of Los Angeles. What they're attempting to do is leverage friendly regime media coverage to try and make it look like there's some sort of massive outpouring of support for illegal alien dirtbags. There isn't. There is a concentrated effort in certain areas, planned, funded, very well executed.
But I mean, Blake, and I was getting messages from progressive ladies over the weekend, the kind of bleeding hearts that were going,
yeah, same here.
It's this. Oh my God! Can you get the people in the handcuffs? And I just said, I responded to them going, okay, nobody should be here in this country that's not here legally. Can we just agree with that? Like, you shouldn't be here in this country if you're not here legally.
Ding.
And Trump has said, get out of here. He's given you plenty of warning to the point where he will pay you to leave.
That's right.
At this point, all you're advocating for is lawlessness. You just want people that ignore their deportation orders or are living in the shadows here illegally to be able to continue to live here. Mm-hmm. You've had plenty of warning. You have a free plane ticket and I think $1,000 to get out of here. Mm-hmm. Plus the encouragement that if you do that, you can do it the right way, come here the right way, get in line, all that stuff. So there's no more excuse at this point.
No. People want to be safe, even in the worst areas of L.A. They don't want this. It's just, it is so obvious. So interesting, Elon, as Jeff and Billy talked about, reposted on X a message from DJT stating that Mayor Karen Bass and Governor Newsom need to apologize to the people of Los Angeles. NBC News White House correspondent John Decker on the show with Jeff and Billy last hour. Does he think Elon and DJT will become friends again one day?
I've seen him patch things up before, and the perfect example of that is the fact that Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State. Think about the terrible things, personal things that Donald Trump and Elon and Marco Rubio said about each other when they were running for the Republican nomination back in 2016. They patched things up, so anything's possible. But right now, there is no relationship between Trump and Musk. It's kaput. And the relationship is not in a good place, but it's possible, certainly. You know, it takes two to tango. If both of them want to repair that relationship, I think they're both capable of that.
Meanwhile, Pope Leo is calling for open borders and an end to hatred. And here we go again, just like Francis, part of the problem. The Colorado State Patrol says one person has died following a wrong-way crash on I-25 in Denver. A woman named Christy noticed the wrong-way driver early Sunday morning and captured the deadly crash on video.
The car just head-on crashed with another car. It was very scary. I felt like I knew it was going to happen. I just had no idea what I could even do. I just felt so helpless.
God, I mean, state troopers amazingly spotted a gray van traveling south and northbound lanes of the interstate near Meade. We're talking about 30 miles north of Denver around 3 in the morning on Sunday. The driver refused to stop, nearly striking a state trooper. The van crashed into another vehicle on I-25 near 20th Street. Around 3:30, the driver of the van died at the scene while 4 other people were taken to the hospital, praying for them. No update has been shared yet on their condition at this time. A deadly shooting on the Las Vegas Strip has claimed the lives of 2 people, and it was all caught on live stream. The shooting happened Sunday night near the Bellagio fountains during what police say was a confrontation between 2 feuding YouTubers. Wow. Authorities say a suspect is in custody. A runaway zebra, I don't know if you saw this video, named Ed, is safely back in his home in Tennessee after a weekend on the loose. Officials tracked Ed with a drone and then used a tranquilizer dart to capture him in a pasture near the interstate. He was then airlifted by helicopter to safety. That was incredible video. Ed is in the this harness. I guess it's like a bag, and so the helicopter is carrying him to safety, the zebra named Ed. So that's good news this morning. Mets beat the Rockies 13-5. Giants, that is, at Coors tomorrow night. The Thunder run past the Pacers in Game 2 of the NBA Championship. Back to Indy for Games 3 and 4, tied at 1. French Open, Carlos Alcaraz wins in the men's, and Coco Gauff took the women's crown. 50 in Castle Rock, 53 in Glendale, 54 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Your 710 5-day forecast here in Denver on this early Monday. A few passing clouds this morning, temperatures around 55 by daybreak. For the rest of your Monday, mostly sunny with a buildup of clouds this afternoon and evening with 20% chance for showers and thunderstorms, highs in the mid-70s. For tonight, mostly clear, lows down to 55 under sunny skies. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. I'm meteorologist Patrice Sutter in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
We'll be joined by Rory O'Neill here in just a second. NBC News National Correspondent, the latest happening in Los Angeles. I want to talk to you first about our friends over at L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. With the weather bouncing all around and even getting hot later this week. 86 on Tuesday, 88 on Friday, 90 on Saturday. You got to have a working air conditioner. Ours went out last summer, went out there, did the research, talked to a number of different firms, the folks we chose, and they've absolutely delivered for us. L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. It was a one-day installation, no stress, replaced AC and furnace, personal service from start to finish. They even followed up to make sure everything was perfect. Now our home totally comfortable no matter what the weather. With L&L Heating and Air Conditioning, we got peace of mind. Here's some of the deals they're working on right now. A free programmable thermostat or carbon monoxide detector with new furnace or air conditioner installation. No emergency charges. Okay? So something breaks, you got a real problem, they're not going to nickel and dime you and drive up that charge. $0 trip fee. Price match value, guarantee on equipment, free estimates. Licensed and insured, and they have a 5-year labor warranty. Everything in our house works great. I can even program my thermostat with my phone. I love it. Our family couldn't be happier. So if you're looking for fast, honest, reliable service, I highly recommend L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. Here's their phone number, 720-851-1691. 720-851-1691. Online at bestdenverhvac.com. bestdenverhvac.com. I'm sure glad we called him. That number again, 720-851-1691, 720-851-1691. All right, riots, Los Angeles. What is going on? Well, on June 6th, federal agents carried out simultaneous operations at the Fashion District, the Home Depot in Westlake, and other sites, arresting anywhere between 44 and 118 individuals, many undocumented and union workers, including SEIU local president David Huerta. As a result, violent confrontations took place. Protesters and ICE LAPD clashed fiercely. Demonstrators hurled concrete chunks, bricks, fireworks, and bottles. Police responded with tear gas, pepper spray, flashbangs, rubber bullets, and declared unlawful assembly status. Bill, I was just looking at the video of the reporter that got shot by the rubber bullet.
Yeah.
Her back was to the police. It's like they were trying to aim through her or something.
Yeah.
And shot her in the back of the leg, it looks like. Gosh. Dozens arrested each night, roughly around 30 to 40. Several protesters and law enforcement have been injured, including 6 guardsmen and 1 journalist hit by a rubber bullet, as I mentioned. So what are the underlying causes here? Well, the ICE raids form part of a larger Trump administration push to arrest up to 3,000 migrants daily. Some are looking at that as going, that's too heavy-handed, overreaching. They're terrorizing the immigrant communities. Well, you've been warned at this point. I don't know what else. I mean, it's just like you're just willingly flaunting the law at this point. if you continue to remain in America illegally. LA's large Hispanic population has viewed the raids as systemic targeting, and they've sparked solidarity demonstrations, often featuring signs and chants against ICE and federal immigration actions. Well, Trump has responded, deploying 2,000 California National Guard troops under Title X, claiming authority to defend federal property and ICE operations amid violent mobs, and a signal that the Marines and other active duty forces are on standby if unrest escalates. With the latest on this is Rory O'Neill, NBC News National Correspondent, joining the Jeff and Bill Show. Good morning, Rory.
Morning.
Hey, good morning. Happy Monday.
Same to you.
What do you got for us? What are the latest news coming out of Los Angeles?
Well, obviously, sun's just coming up. The police have control of downtown, though things in Los Angeles, though things are pretty much still shut down, especially in that area of the federal building where there are also National Guard troops deployed. There is going to be a rally again in Los Angeles, I think 2 o'clock Eastern time, so 11 a.m. their time. So let's see if things escalate once again. But, you know, this all started as a trickle on Friday, got pretty bad on Saturday, and then we saw it really explode into a large-scale protest, a lot of vandalism, graffiti, police cars destroyed, robot taxis set on fire, some limited vandalism and looting reported as well, I should say.
Yeah, it seems to me that maybe the Waymo programmers would just geofence a certain area. We're not going to send our little robots in there. Because I was joking with Bill, it's like lighting R2-D2 on fire. Like, what did he have to do? He's just moving through, and then all of a sudden he gets the brunt of this thing. Some of this, too, has been waged online via Gavin Newsom, Donald Trump. Can you tell us what Gavin Newsom's saying via X in response to Trump's actions?
Well, President Trump's decision to call up the National Guard without the consent of the governor is not something that happens often in this country. The last time it happened was 60 years ago, 1965, when LBJ activated the Alabama National Guard to enforce civil rights laws. So this isn't something we've seen a lot of. And we heard from Governor Newsom, we heard from Mayor Bass of Los Angeles. They believe that the presence of the National Guard and these troops that have been activated by the president, they claim makes things worse, that aggravates the situation. And it did turn it into a rallying point yesterday where we saw most of the demonstrations that then led to the closure of the 101 freeway and the destruction of all those vehicles. But as you pointed out, the troops are really just guarding federal buildings. They're not roaming the streets of Los Angeles. They're not arresting people. They're simply providing security for now at the federal buildings in downtown L.A.
That's Rory O'Neill, NBC News National Correspondent. Can you tell us a little bit about the initial raids that took place? What we're reading is that it was the Garment District. It was a Home Depot. Does this mark a shift in the Trump administration away from pursuing violent criminals for deportation to now kind of mass deportations? If you're here illegally, we're picking you up, and now we're targeting the Garment District and the guys that might be hanging outside at Home Depot, for instance.
Right. I mean, well, we heard from Stephen Miller, the special advisor to the president. I forget his exact title, but he was leaning on ICE and Homeland Security to increase the arrest numbers. I think he wanted to see them double to about 3,000 a day. And then this is part of it. Los Angeles being a sanctuary city, local police don't cooperate with ICE. So on matters like this, on these civil immigration issues, so it's up to ICE to go out there, and the low-hanging fruit is to go check out the crowd looking for day labor work outside the Home Depot. So that's where we're seeing more of this activity now by immigration authorities looking for people who are in the country illegally. As you know, we heard after January 20th that the priority would be we're out to get the murderers and the child rapists and the molesters and whatever and what so forth. But now the concern is, wait, this is just everyday people, quote unquote, who are not here in the country with proper paperwork. And the LA area is believed to have about 1 million undocumented migrants living just there.
That's Rory O'Neill, NBC News National Correspondent, joining Jeff and Bill live. Rory, if they start picking up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 immigrants a day, what does that look like, in your opinion, based on the backlog as far as court cases and processing? The more people they pick up, the more people they're going to have to work through and process. They ran into difficulty with Garcia, who's just recently back from the El Salvador prison and now is going to face trial for allegedly being a human trafficker. Could the Trump administration be stepping on a rake by trying to round up so many immigrants that they don't have the facilities or the staff to process all of them to get them out of the country in a reasonable amount of time? Could this end up being a problem for them in the future?
Well, in the Abrego Garcia case, the whole issue was he didn't get processing at all, that he was sent to El Salvador without processing. And that's been one of the other issues causing anxiety among the locals there in Southern California, is this idea of, the kids come home from school and a parent is gone, or vice versa. And it's difficult to track where they've been, whether or not they have access to attorneys and all that. So that's more the gray area, whereas the administration has been arguing they're not citizens, they don't have to be afforded due process. And that's sort of an ongoing legal battle right now. So, that is a factor. And again, is adding to some of the anxiety and these protests out there that people are being rounded up and sent out of the country. Or maybe they're in a holding cell somewhere and family members can't get a hold of them.
Rory O'Neill, NBC News National Correspondent. I think this might be the last or second to last question we've got for you. Have you heard anything about engagement orders, the mission that the National Guard has been sent to execute while in Los Angeles? You talked earlier about them so far just providing perimeter security at federal buildings. From your research and reporting, what have you found out about the purpose for the National Guard being in L.A.?
Well, what we heard from the president, who activated the troops, is essentially that that he'll make the call, especially if it comes to perhaps even activating or using Marines who are stationed there nearby, which would also be rather unprecedented to have a U.S. Military force essentially going against Americans. So that would bring you constitutional issues as well. But, the president essentially is swinging a big hammer here. I think he's trying to intimidate a lot of people, and I mean that in the most positive way, in terms of, getting them to, go ahead, peacefully protest if you must, but keep it peaceful. And if things get out of hand, we're going to bring the hammer down on you.
We're starting to see posts that this may be coming to Colorado as well tonight. There's going to be some protests, and then tomorrow night as well. Are you seeing this start to move to other cities?
Well, look, this week we're supposed to have that big military parade in Washington on June 14th, Flag Day, President Trump's birthday. There's a lot of military hardware being brought in for the big military parade. And at the same time, counter-protesters, people who are not supporters of the president, are planning demonstrations all across the country against this parade and this display. So I think we're going to see this escalate all across the country. A lot of this unrest out there. Of course, this is all happening as kids get out of school, either high school or college kids get out of school. And, a lot of these protests are now ways to make content for online formats.
That's Rory O'Neill with an NBC News National Correspondent joining us on the latest with regards to the L.A. riots. Appreciate you joining us this morning, Rory. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So, are we getting ready for another summer of love like we had in 2020 with the BLM riots in cities across, quote unquote, mostly peaceful as buildings burn in the background? Are we going to see a similar run up to this? My gut is telling me yes, because the left likes to use this type of social disruption, these types of violent protests throughout the country in order to stir up resentment against the current administration. We saw it in 2020. I think we're going to see it again this summer, and this is just the beginning. Feel free to join us in the conversation. Phone lines are open, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Again, that number, 720-819-5115. And who do you hold accountable here? Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass saying Donald Trump is stirring up a hornet's nest. It's your fault for getting involved. This could be just quiet little protests against ICE agents. Or has the protests that I've been attending for the last few months now turning violent, and it is absolutely necessary for Donald Trump to send in these troops to protect the federal ICE agents as well as federal land out there in the federal buildings? Who do you blame? Give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line, 720-819-5115. Bill, to Rory's point, 1 million illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. Boy, oh boy, Donald Trump's walking right into the heart of it, rounding up the illegals and getting them out. I love it. What do you think?
I think this is something that the Trump administration has been itching for.
You're exactly right.
Since his first administration, he's wanted to deploy the military inside the country. He's wanted to make this kind of a statement. And so this is something that I believe he relishes in and he's looking for. I question the need for the National Guard at this point. I saw there was a statement that was put out yesterday by Gavin Newsom that was cleverly written by one of the lawyers on staff because it ticked a series of boxes. And it might have been Saturday, but it ticked a series of boxes allowing some legal pushback on what Trump is doing. And it's the phrases of things like the police had control of the situation, etc. And I understand the idea of, oh my gosh, they're lighting a car on fire. That's not control. They're throwing rocks at the police. That's not control. Okay, then explain to me the celebrations we have when our teams win championships. That's not necessarily viewed as being out of control per se. And so that's what I have had, and I've spent some time over the weekend looking at, is if I view the videos of when our teams win Super Bowl, NBA championships, they seem more violent than what I saw there in LA. I'm not saying either is okay, but I'm talking about a comparison of the two. And if when we are celebrating, we are out there breaking things, looting stores, lighting things on fire, getting into fights, and then we're doing it here, I'm questioning the need necessarily, the cause to deploy the military. I think this is an overreach and an overstep. I'm not convinced that the military needed to be called up, and I believe that Hegseth is doing more harm than good by saying we're ready to deploy the Marines. That's a whole nother level. That's a different ball of wax entirely to deploy active military versus the National Guard. That's another level.
Yeah,
and
Marines were never deployed in 92, just the National Guard. So
yeah, and that idea of that's a really weird one. And the fact that Hegseth was so quick to say, yes, and we are ready, and we'll send them too. I'm like, pardon me? Again, maybe I'm seeing different videos. Maybe I'm seeing different pictures. Maybe I'm seeing different live streams. But I find almost no difference from the Super Bowl celebrations and these riots. In fact, I see the Super Bowl celebrations in many places being more violent and untoward and more people breaking things than we see here.
Yeah,
so
I
just want
see
to know
it
the
differently
justification.
because what's actually happening here is a political battle playing itself out on the streets. And so this isn't just kind of one night of a city getting its celebration energy out. This is a concerted effort by the left to try to mobilize and mobilize riots in an effort to destabilize the United States to make the current administration look bad. you have to put yourself in the position of the average person that tunes into news just a little bit. They're seeing riots out there. They're thinking to themselves, well, Donald Trump's not in control of this nation anymore. And rioters are out there. Maybe we need to change things up a little bit. Donald Trump is not going to let happen to this country what happened in 2020. And so this is going to be a quick mobilization. This is going to be a strong response. Yes, the idea of sending out the Marines is an escalation, but it's on the table to send a message to these radical leftists that this time Trump administration's not messing around, and this could get real tough on you if you continue to pursue that. That's what I see is happening. Feel free to join us. Give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line, 720-819-5115. These protests are coming to Denver tonight and tomorrow. Do you want to see a strong response? If you remember last time, the BLM riots, those continued for days, weeks here in Denver. Do you want to see Donald Trump respond in strength and force to protect your communities, the city of Denver, or is he just going to stir up more frustration and pushback as a result of it? Want to hear directly from you. All right.
And are we assuming a riot?
Yeah.
That's the other question.
Right.
Are we assuming? I've
been down to these protests. I'll tell you, the images from these flyers, though, this seems to be another level. So we'll have to see. But that's a good point. Are we assuming riots? All right, let's talk Dan Caplis with Dan Caplis Law. I've known Dan well over a decade. Pro-life, pro-family, pro-faith, pro-America. This guy is the real deal, bringing justice to people hurt in injury cases in this state. You've been hurt in a car accident? Dan Caplis, the guy to call. All right? 40 years helping people who are hurt in serious motor vehicle crashes here in Colorado. He's a real winner in the courtroom. Listen to this. Dan is believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Dan is also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Caplis Law is so trusted, he's the official law firm partner of the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Dan Caplis Law is a serious firm for serious cases. He accepts righteous injury cases on a percentage fee basis so that he can represent good people from all walks of life without regard to ability to pay. So if you need Dan's help, give him a call. Why not put his phone number in your phone now so you can quickly access it following a car accident? Here's his phone number, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or hit dancaplisLaw.com. That's Dan, CAPLIS Law.com. Text messages starting to come in. 8422. With all due respect, Bill, this is one of your worst analogies, comparing a Super Bowl win to what's going on in L.A. Can't you see these protesters in L.A. want a lawless society? Your response, sir.
What makes us think that they want a lawless society? I believe the texter is drawing a conclusion that we don't have an evidence. What evidence do we have that these protesters want a lawless society? Or are you just upset and saying, because they're doing stuff I don't like, now you're lawless, and thus you're not part of our society? But we have over 1,000 people that were convicted of some lawless stuff a couple of years ago that got pardoned by the president. So does it matter what lawlessness you're participating in? Does it matter what party you're supporting in these alleged lawlessness? We have a large group of lawlessness. We have it all the time. And stuff behind after a Super Bowl celebration or an NBA championship, yeah, that's lawless. That's lawless, absolutely. I watched it during the Denver Broncos Super Bowl win. That's lawless.
Couldn't you say, though, that these people want to live in a lawless society because it's very clear they're not following immigration law?
No, that it could be very clear they disagree with how the immigration law is enforced. And when we were told that we were going to round up all the criminals and all the bad people that were killing people, then going to, well, you're a criminal if you just cross the border, that wasn't necessarily what was promised when we were talking about the violence that the immigrants were inflicting in our communities. Going after someone that just crosses the border and is working as a dishwasher somewhere doesn't necessarily mean, doesn't seem to be attacking that violence. So that would be the issue. Is I think the texter is making an assumption that these people want a lawless society when in fact maybe they don't want an authoritarian society. Maybe that's the differentiation.
All right, give us a call. Would love to hear from you. 303-696-1971. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jesper Bill Show. We're talking the L.A. riots. No, it's not 1992. It's 2025. But there's rioting back in Los Angeles as federal immigration officials, ICE, are trying to implement the law, the call for mass deportations. If you're here illegally, you got to go. You've been warned. We offered you a plane ticket and $1,000 if you're still sticking around. Well, then you're willingly breaking the law. You've got to go. Lots of text messages in on this. Suzanne saying, Bill, you're right. Trump doesn't favor military action outside the country, but golly, he's been itching to send the military within this country, and he finally did it. Others saying, look, Bill, I may not like following the speed limit, but I have to. And if I get arrested, I'm breaking the law. I'm going to get a ticket or I might be arrested. It's the law. These are lawless people. And Trump is responding appropriately. What do you think? Give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line, 720-819-5115. Bill, in my mind, this is what an invasion looks like.
Like what?
Standing on top of burning cars, holding the flag of another nation. How is that not an invasion?
Because historically, invasion has been defined as a nation moving troops against another in order to reach a necessary goal.
Why does it have to be troops?
What are they going to move? Cows?
People.
Quarters?
People. You just move in a whole bunch of people.
No.
They claim their allegiance to another nation. They're raising the flag of another nation over land that belongs to Americans.
Yeah.
While burning cars and violently confronting the law enforcement of that nation.
Well,
it's an invasion.
The whole flag thing was said about Germans and Irish and Italians and Chinese and not holding things close to the founding of the country. It was also said about the Catholics at one time in this nation as well. So I put very little stock into that complaint at all because it seems to be a trope.
We don't have German flags flying around.
Hang on, but at the time in which when they were immigrating, when they were getting to be a growing portion of the country, yes, we have Chinatowns.
But then they assimilated.
But hang on, we have Chinatowns. And part of the, again, we've talked about this, the assimilation.
Do they fly the Chinese flags?
Part of the, hang on, let me get through this. They set up their own community. When you're talking about them assimilating, they separated themselves. There's Germantown. There are Italian sections of New York. That happens routinely based on how. Talk about the Germans and some of the Dutch that settle inside of the Pennsylvania Dutch. That's an entire ethnic community that settles in there. That was the argument, that they're not integrating, they're not assimilating. My argument has been when you get these people into work, when you get them into schools, that is assimilation, that's education, but we get mad about that. But I'm going to put that aside. When we're talking about the idea of this being an invasion, no, invasions don't happen with just regular people. They don't happen with families. Invasions historically, I'm talking about how the courts have defined them historically, and it's important because if we're going to define this as an invasion, there are some legalities that come with that. And the courts have historically defined an invasion based on military troops, not based on families that come over here of their own volition. The invasion happens because an organization, another government sends them here. We don't have that. So this does not qualify as an invasion. We may dislike it. People don't be happy with it. But using it as invasion is a loaded word that does not fit this specific example. So that's just, and yeah, these people, yeah, there are riots and there are things going on that people disagree with, and in part because of how the immigration laws have been enforced recently. We just had the president of Latinos for Trump say that she disagrees with what Trump is doing. She said, we voted for him, but we didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for how he's executing these immigration orders.
How should he?
That's he should prioritize exactly what he said. Those that are the violent criminals.
All right, so if someone...
That's what he needs to do.
You have 1 million people in Los Angeles that aren't following the law.
What percentage of those are violent criminals?
But to my point, though, you have 1 million people that have already decided they're not going to follow the law. right? So what do you do? I don't care if you're violent or not. You've broken the law. So what do you do with people who you say, hey, you've broken the law. You need to go back to your country and do this the right way. And they shrug. And then you go, hey, we're going to pay you to leave. We'll buy you a plane ticket and $1,000 to leave. And they shrug. What do you do with those people?
Again, I'm going to deal with the first question that was asked, which was, which ones? Violent criminals. And I answered that, and you then went on to just talk about everybody.
Right.
And that's the problem in this conversation, is that when Trump ran, it was, we need to get the violent criminals out. If you listen to the people on the curvy couch in the morning, they talk about, these people that were committing violent acts for the entire Biden administration.
Only them.
Hang on. That's the highlight. The highlight is always about the violent illegal immigrants, and those are the people that need to be gone. That's what Trump ran on, was the violence and the crime. But
only them. He said, I'm only going to deport them.
Hang on. What I'm saying is that's what we ran on. That was the promise, that we need to get them out. And
we need
then
to
we
start
can work
with
on
them.
it.
But
yes.
I don't think he ever said we're only getting them out.
Hang on a sec, though. Start with them. Are they all gone? What percentage? And that's where you're having this pushback, is that because Stephen Miller needs more numbers, you're going after people that are dishwashers, that are rank and files, that don't necessarily have
see this
violent.
You didn't think this was going to happen.
That what was going to happen?
That you were going to have mass deportations.
Oh, here's the thing. I have outlined on this show prior to the election, I was very clear about this. And I said, everybody who is voting for Trump based on illegal immigration understand that the people supporting him believe the crime that you have committed is crossing the border.
Yes.
I understand that a lot of people supporting him that wouldn't normally viewed it as the violent criminals, because it was the Laken Riley Act, because that what was being played on TV all the time was all these violent illegals. How many times did Fox News run a story in the morning about another immigrant getting violent and committing violent crime in America? It was at least every 48 hours in the run-up to the election. That was the filter. That was how it was being sold. That's how it was being discussed. And that's where we were going with this. And so that's the delineation right now. That's the disagreement, is that originally it was get all the criminals and the bad people out. But when you're picking up someone that's a mom that's been here for 20 years and has nothing more than possibly crossing illegally and maybe some driver's issues, that's fine. But that's not the...
warned. And we could just keep warning people that they need to go home. But at a certain point, you need to send them home.
Where's the violent criminals? That's the issue.
Well,
that's the issue. Where's the violent
9310,
criminals?
they're burning cars in Los Angeles. All right, give us a call.
But do we know those are illegal violent criminals?
303-696-1971. Text us at 720-819-5115. It's spicy this morning. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Blake doesn't know this, but I can see him on camera dancing to this.
Oh, that's great.
Well done, Blake Olson. Well, welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Bill and I hotly debating the LA riots and what's taking place there, who's at fault, and is this what Trump wanted all along? Now I can send military troops and Marines into all the cities to control them. Or is he just rightly stepping in like a dad would and saying, knock it off. I'm not going to let you burn my cities down like you did in 2020 again. America is going to be different this time. Iggy pointing out, Bill, he noticed no soccer violence examples.
Because you talk to the audience where they are. If I start using examples of that, it's not necessarily as applicable. But if you want to talk about it, there were a bunch of things that were lit on fire after PSG won the Champions League. In fact, 2 people lost their life. And that was in a celebration. So for perspective, PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, wins the Champions League for the first time in their history. And during the celebration, 2 people lose their life. I didn't think that happened over the violent riots over the weekend. Just for a little perspective.
8422 pointing out, Bill, did the Germans, Dutch, Italians, and Chinese that came here to build little communities within communities go into the streets and burn American flags and destroy property and attack law enforcement?
Here's the thing with that answer, with the question, is there's an assumption that all these illegals or all this community is doing that. There's an assumption that everybody showed up at that protest is an illegal. There's a whole lot of assumptions that the texture has contained inside there. Let's just
raising flags from other countries.
I have a person that is Germanic, is from Germany. His family's from Germany. Puts a German flag up in our neighborhood all the time. I don't find that offensive. But here's the big question. We have 1 million alleged illegals inside of LA. How often are these riots happening? How often? Are they happening every week? So if the assumption is these people are out there waving their flags, attacking law enforcement,
you say it again.
Riots.
There's 1 million Germans? Is that what you said?
No, a million illegals. A million illegals out in LA. 1 million illegals in LA. Where are the riots?
Because we finally tried to enforce the law?
No. But where are the riots? This person is saying that these illegals are coming to America, waving flags, and starting riots and burning cars.
Well, that's because we tried to enforce the law. This was the first time we did anything.
I don't see. No, we've been enforcing immigration. Barack Obama deported a whole bunch of people. Don't pretend this is the first time we enforced the law.
In L.A.?
Don't pretend.
He did.
Don't pretend that we're just enforcing the law.
He didn't send in the troops and federal law enforcement like
but the
Trump
troops
just
came
did?
in after the riots.
Yeah, I know, but federal law enforcement.
So you're going to see your cart
didn't
horse.
Do that?
Cart horse.
Nah, you're listening to Jeff and Bill.
KNUS.
and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't understand why agree with that.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS.
Olson. Gabe Evans joining us, Congressman from Congressional District 8. Congress is taking on the rise of anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli terror attacks that are taking place on U.S. soil. What is Congress going to do about it? He's going to join us. I'll also ask him about the L.A. riots and what President Trump's doing, calling up the California National Guard and even threatening to use Marines. As a former law enforcement man and veteran, what does he think of all this? We'll get to that. But now, news and comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson. Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good Monday morning, 57 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 79 today. It's going to be a beautiful day. The 710 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story.
We're going to be watching it very closely. And when they spit at people, you know, they spit. That's their new thing. They spit, and worse, you know what they throw at them, right? And when that happens, I have a little statement. They say, they spit, we hit.
DJT's not going to allow the paid communist protesters or any of these clowns to get away with the garbage that we saw in 2020. Problem is, there are a lot of them, and Governor Gavin Newsom and Maxine Waters continue to stoke the flames. Waters goes down there and starts doing what she does best, rile the Marxist commies up and plays dumb and acts like a victim. NBC News correspondent Rory O'Neill on with Jeff and Billy last hour.
Things are pretty much still shut down, especially in that area of the federal building where there are also National Guard troops deployed. There is going to be a rally again in Los Angeles, I think 2 o'clock Eastern time, so 11 a.m. their time. So let's see if things escalate once again. But, you know, this all started as a trickle on Friday, got pretty bad on Saturday, and then we saw it really explode into a large-scale protest, a lot of vandalism, graffiti, police cars destroyed, robot taxis set on fire, some limited vandalism and looting reported as well.
The Democrats trying to create as much chaos as possible and hope some nut job shoots and kills somebody. Then they can blame it all on 47. Colonel Kurt Schlichter on the Chris DeGaulle show this morning before we came on, and he lives in Southern California.
It's a very small area. It's very remote. They want to give the impression to the rest of the United States that all of Los Angeles is in chaos. It isn't. We're going through our lives normally here and 99% of Los Angeles. What they're attempting to do is leverage friendly regime media coverage to try and make it look like there's some sort of massive outpouring of support for illegal alien dirtbags. There isn't. There is a concentrated effort in certain areas, planned, funded, very well executed.
Somewhat surprising last night, Elon reposting on X a message from DJT stating that Mayor Karen Bass and Newsom need to apologize to the people of Los Angeles. NBC News White House correspondent John Decker, who's been on top of this from the beginning with the fellas this morning, and says you never know with friendships.
I've seen him patch things up before, and the perfect example of that is the fact that Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State. Think about the terrible things, personal things that Donald Trump and Marco Rubio said about each other when they were running for the Republican nomination back in 2016. They patched things up, so anything's possible. But right now, there is no relationship between Trump and Musk. It's kaput. and the relationship is not in a good place. But it's possible, certainly. You know, it takes two to tango. If both of them want to repair that relationship, I think they're both capable of that.
The 30th annual Boulder Jewish Festival celebrated a large turnout from the community Sunday at Pearl Street Mall. Naor Bitten, who intervened to help during last week's attack, says supporters were not going to let terrorism silence their voices.
Our strength is in unity, and we are always driving towards peace.
The 15 Boulder terrorism victims were honored in a reading of their names at the festival. People bust in from all across Colorado to show their support. One attendee says she wanted to come to stand up to hate and show they're not scared to be themselves.
I want to be in the open. This is who we are. Can we just be human like everybody else, you know? And not because we're Jewish, we're going to be mistreated and the object of assaults.
Hey, the Giants are at Coors tomorrow night to start a series. The Mets beat the Rockies last night 13-5. The Thunder run past the Pacers in Game 2 of the NBA championship. It heads back to Indianapolis for Games 3 and 4 tied at 1. 56 in Lone Tree, 54 in Lafayette, 57 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Good morning, Denver. Your 710 5-day forecast will bring a lot of sunshine to the metro as we kick off a new work week. Temperatures today will be in the upper 70s with lows tonight in the mid-50s. Tuesday through the rest of the week, we'll be getting back to the middle and even upper 80s. We'll have sunshine, mainly dry conditions tomorrow with lows upper 50s. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms return. Weather brought to you by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather. Schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection at roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Dawn Watzel in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
All right, the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence is going to have a hearing this week to assess the heightened threat of anti-Semitic terrorist attacks in the United States, especially in the wake of the recent attacks in Washington, D.C. and in Boulder, Colorado. A member of the committee, and joining us now is Congressman Gabe Evans of Congressional District 8. That's the northern part of Denver. Congressman, thank you for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yes, good morning.
No, always good to be on with you guys.
All right, let's talk about this. And I want to remind people of your background. I mean, years with law enforcement, years in the military. You are a law and order man. Let's talk first the rise of anti-Semitic terrorist attacks taking place in the United States. Give us your sense of what's happening and how you expect the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence to respond to these.
Yeah, well, the first thing is we had a briefing on the rise of anti-Semitism. I believe it was last week. Some incredibly shocking and concerning numbers. Anti-Semitic attacks are up over 800% over. I can't remember what the time frame was, but over the last several years. So clearly something that is a problem. And unfortunately, thoughts and condolences aren't enough. We have to actually be able to take action to prevent these things from occurring. And prevent these things from occurring. And so as a cop, as a soldier, I can tell you there's two things we got to do. First, we got to loudly condemn this wherever this actually occurs. But then we actually have to go back and we have to look at good policies and the policies that have been put in place to prevent these things from occurring. I joined the Army after September 11th. And one of the things that came about from the September 11th terror attack was this thing called the the 9/11 Commission, which studied how do we prevent a terrorist attack like what happened in Boulder from occurring in the United States. One of the big takeaways of this was you have to have federal, state, and local law enforcement able to all work together to share pieces of the puzzle, because if the feds have half the pieces of the puzzle, state and local has the other half, and they can't talk to each other to share this information, then you're going to miss things like what happened. And so, unfortunately, when you have a state like Colorado that is a sanctuary state, you can't share all the pieces of the puzzle, and then things like what happened in Boulder happened because of bad policies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is the fact that the man that attacked the Jews in Boulder had overstayed his visa, was still able to get a Colorado driver's license, and at one point had even tried to purchase a gun in which he was planning to use to shoot Jews. And that never got notified to the FBI or others because it remained entirely localized. So the importance of states coordinating like that. We're talking to Gabe Evans, Congressman from Congressional District 8. Now, you're going to be hosting a hearing. You're part of the committee that's hosting a hearing this Wednesday on the rise of anti-Semitic terrorist attacks. What do you expect to get out of this hearing?
It's going to be a lot of solutions, because ultimately that's what the American people expect from Congress. We have to be able to, ask the questions, really dig into the issues, figure out where the breakdowns were. And unfortunately, what you just talked about is a prime example of those breakdowns. You ran through most of the pieces of evidence there, as it were, if I had my cop hat on and I was explaining this. An individual that's actually overstayed 2 visas. First visa was a tourist visa. When he came into the United States, overstayed that one, then was given a work visa, which he also overstayed. Multiple public statements in support of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an organization with known radical and jihadist-leaning affiliations. Tried to buy a gun in November of last year, so this is, 6 months ago now at this point, tried to buy a gun, was denied that purchase because of his immigration status. The state entity that handles those background checks is CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, but because it was denied as a result of his immigration status, presumably this was not elevated or flagged to anybody else that, hey, we got a person illegally present in the country with ties to an organization with jihadist leaning, tried to buy a gun at a time of heightened anti-Semitism. That should have raised a red flag. And through the comedy of tragic errors and outright policy failures that prevented that from being flagged at the appropriate levels, ultimately we get one of the worst firebombing attacks. So it's going to be digging into situations like that we try to figure out where the breakdowns are and how do we actually have the good policies necessary to both prevent anti-Semitic attacks and then also broader terrorist attacks through good policy and policy that fixes these failures.
Talking with Gabe Evans, he's Congressman from Congressional District 8. That's the northern part of Denver, a committee that he sits on, the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence, hosting a committee meeting this week to address growing anti-Semitic, anti-Israel terrorist attacks taking place. Now, Gabe, I want to ask you this. Less than a week before the terrorist attack that took place in Boulder, I ran the Boulder with my boys. Went up there, and throughout the entirety of the race, just about 6 miles, there were Free Palestine protesters. Boulder City Council, this was a headline out of the New York Times, has had to deal with the Gaza-Israel issue within its city council. We've talked to lawmakers like Ron Weinberg, who, not this past session, but the session prior to that, had to deal with being shouted down by Palestinian-supporting Democrat lawmakers from the gallery. They would go up into the gallery and yell at the Republican Jew that was trying to make a statement in support of Israel.
I was there for that.
Well, yeah, that's right. You were a lawmaker at that point, a state lawmaker. How much of the problem that we're facing with the rise of anti-Semitism is the Democrat Party just turning a blind eye to anti-Semitism growing within its own party, not condemning it, not shutting it down? I mean, the Boulder had it throughout almost the entirety of the race, Free Palestine chants. And I think we're now all at a point where we understand that that's a call for violence against Jews, especially in light of the last 2 attacks, both attackers yelling Free Palestine as they're either shooting or burning Jews. So At what point do we put the onus on the Democrat Party to address this within their own party, the anti-Semitism? Your thoughts, sir?
Wow, so funny you asked that. So I'll read you this quote here from a story talking about Colorado Dems are facing backlash for holding a fundraiser with Ilhan Omar less than an hour after Sunday's anti-Semitic terrorist attack in which multiple people were hurt, including a Holocaust survivor. So, no, I think you're onto something there insofar as somebody who's loudly anti-Semitic, Congresswoman Omar, was in Colorado doing a fundraiser with elected Democrats, some of whom hail from Boulder, the same day that this occurred. And so the inability to condemn statements like Free Palestine as anti-Semitic and as a call for violence against Jews, and the continued, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, going to a fundraiser with Omar on the same day that you have an anti-Semitic terrorist attack, again, with some of these Democrats attending that fundraiser being from Boulder, I think you're on to something there, and we need to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that they condemn anti-Semitic thought, word, deed, wherever it emerges.
Now, Congressman Gabe Evans from CD8 joining Jeff and Bill live, and that's where I want to go with this, Congressman Evans, is the idea of chasing down this anti-Semitism no matter where it resides, even if it may reside on the conservative side of the aisle. I would bring up Nick Fuentes. Now he's fringe, but
he's
easily,
not a conservative.
He's considered a conservative influencer, and he is far right. He is far right based on the political
He's
spectrum.
definitely far right.
He is
I'll
far
give you
right.
that. But I will tell you, as a conservative, Nick Fuentes.
Well, then let's throw in someone like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, or Candace Owens. All of them have entertained anti-Semitic guests or even said things that are anti-Semitic themselves. Candace being the biggest example right now, but Joe Rogan has hosted at least 3 Holocaust deniers on his podcast. Doesn't have any pushback or anything else. Rogan is given credit as being one of the reasons that Donald Trump did so well in the previous election. Are we, when we're looking at the idea of rising anti-Semitism, Congressman Evans, are we really going to approach this through a lens of anti-Semitism, or will our political lens fog the issue a little bit? What do you think?
Well, 2 thoughts for you there. The first is, no, we need to condemn anti-Semitism wherever it comes up. And unfortunately, it's not solely limited to the left party. But that leads to the second thought, which is that I actually did an interview with CNN. I think it was last week, in which we had the same conversation and acknowledged that it needs to be condemned wherever it emerges. But, and this wasn't me, this was CNN admitting this, acknowledging that the overwhelming vast majority, if not all, of the violence that is occurring is coming from the left. And so while we condemn it wherever we find it, left, right, middle, somewhere else, the violence that is coming from this, the people that are actually going out and throwing Molotov cocktails or trying to burn down the Pennsylvania governor's residence because he's Jewish, Democrat Jew, by the way, or these murders that occurred in Washington, D.C., the violence is coming from the left side of the aisle. And so, of course, that is where our focus has to immediately be, because that is where we prevent the actual attacks, the loss of life, the violence, the criminal acts against the Jewish community. We condemn it everywhere. But, again, not my words, CNN's, the violence is coming from the left.
Yeah, I'm really curious about how this is going to work, Congressman Evans, because I believe that, as you outlined, yes, the violence is coming from the left overwhelmingly right now, the anti-Semitic violence, and I believe that's because of a growing anti-Israel narrative. And it's been shocking to me seeing it rise on the left, but I believe that's where personally, and I'd be curious to see, as you guys do the investigation, where this goes, but I believe that the rise of anti-Israel language is giving breath and voice to the violence, because people feel like they are counteracting what they feel Israel is doing. Whether they are or they aren't, but I think that's where the emotion and the violence starts, that kernel. Not necessarily at, quote, anti-Semitism, but at the anti-Israel. And once you become anti-Israel, oh boy, that's an easy jump to get to anti-Semitism. It's a very easy way to embrace that ideology. Yeah.
Yep. We do have a phone call, Congressman, if you don't mind taking it. It's from Herb in Denver. He's got some questions about working with the Jewish community locally. Herb, you're on with Jeff and Bill and Congressman Gabe Evans.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. I call myself a Jewish Zionist. I'm just wondering, is Congressman working with the local allies, well, it's called the Jewish Colorado and their secure network to find out what's going on in the Denver and the Colorado community and specifically work to protect Jews here.
Yeah, so this is obviously Congressman Evans, willing to have conversations with anybody that's willing to have a dialogue. Obviously, there's several folks that existing relationships that I have in the Jewish community in Colorado and the Denver area that I go to, just to make sure that we're staying connected with the Jewish community, but always interested in being able to expand that conversation with anybody that's willing to have a reasonable dialogue.
So, Herb, if you have ideas, be sure to contact his office. I appreciate the call. We've got some other issues we're going to cover with the congressman here. But to your point, Herb, Congressman Gabe Evans is a great person to connect with. His office, very willing to work with the Jewish community, and obviously something they want to address through their committee hearing. Now, Congressman, I want to pivot a little bit here, talk Los Angeles and what's happening over there. Give us your read on the riots that broke out Thursday, Friday, continued through the weekend, and most importantly, kind of President Trump's response, calling up the National Guard and even threatening to use the Marines. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, so let's go back to square one, where this started, and let's look at some of the individuals that ICE was going out to detain. You have Rolando Enriquez, a national of the Philippines with prior convictions for sex assault, assault with intent to commit rape, and burglary in California. You got another guy here. Known gang member, convictions for sexual battery, receiving stolen property, and theft. Another guy here, previously deported, known gang member, convictions for assault with a deadly weapon and possessing drug paraphernalia. A fourth individual here, Mexican national, conviction for assault with a deadly weapon, causing great bodily injury in Los Angeles. These are the people that Immigration and Customs is targeting, the people with criminal backgrounds, violent individuals, drug-dealing individuals, individuals known to carry weapons in the commission of their crime. Oftentimes, and in these particular cases, here in Colorado, we always have the discussion around, a warrant versus an ICE detainer. Well, these are warrants signed by judges that ICE is using to go out and apprehend these individuals. So, worst of the worst, ICE goes out, apprehends these individuals. Protest breaks out from the pro-sanctuary city and state crowd in California. It escalates to the point where there's being violence and vandalism displayed toward federal buildings, at which point, once federal buildings are now being attacked by protesters, we've seen this movie before. We know what peaceful protest, quote unquote, means. That tends to mean, windows smashed, things destroyed, cars on fire. And so at that point, in order to preserve the rule of law and to make sure that the businesses and everybody else that's trying to go about their life doesn't suffer the consequences of these riots and violence spiraling out of control, that's where then you see the National Guard and other assets being activated to make sure that we are able to preserve the rule of law. But again, it all goes back to those individuals that I led this off with, violent, known criminals, rape, assault, guns, illegally in the country, committing other crimes. That's who's being targeted here, and they don't want to go quietly, so they're causing problems.
That's Congressman Gabe Evans from CD8. Well, Congressman Evans, we've seen a number of reports of people being picked up that aren't necessarily falling into that violent criminal. Someone that is husbands or wives that have been in the country for decades, restaurant owners, shop owners. Those people are also being caught up in this sweep. Is it fair to say that we're only targeting the violent criminals given the other people that have been arrested and are slated for deportation?
So 2 thoughts on that. The first is, whenever we talk about criminal backgrounds, it's important to note that generally what we mean is American criminal backgrounds because, generally the media or other sources, they don't have the ability to go to foreign countries and go get a background check. I mean, I suppose you could, but it's difficult to get. So when we talk about criminal histories, typically the qualifier there is American criminal histories. ICE, however, can see much more than that. They can see what somebody has done in foreign countries that might not be readily available. And so in the conversations that I've had with them, they've highlighted that just because an individual doesn't necessarily have a criminal conviction or history in the United States doesn't mean that they don't have one in another country. It's just, that information is not as readily available. So that's the first thought out there. The second thought that's out there is, if somebody that has been present in the United States illegally is contacted by ICE, and I asked them, what's your process? They said, well, we have to follow the law, but for somebody that isn't out committing crimes, typically it's the same thing I would do as a cop if I found somebody committing a low-level crime. It's fingerprints, photographs, and give them a court date and release them again. ICE cannot hold people punitively. They cannot hold people, even from a public safety perspective. The only reason ICE can hold an individual is if there is a credible path to deportation. And that's a very important distinction because that means if a foreign country doesn't want to take their people back, you don't have a credible path to deportation. And so two things. The new administration being able to muscle a lot of these foreign countries into taking their folks back has been huge from a public safety perspective, because previously you had a violent criminal from Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone says, we're not taking that person back. Well, eventually ICE would have to release that person back into the community. So the only people that ICE is actually able to detain and hold in custody are people for whom there is a credible path to deportation, and for whom, with that credible path, then there is some sort of other either flight or public safety risk. If you're somebody that, again, is illegally present in the country, you're probably going to get fingerprinted and given a court date to come back and turn free.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that, Congressman Evans, but we have the example of the shop owners even in New Jersey that were picked up. They didn't have a criminal past per se, and they were held for a while and then released on bond. They're going to have to come back, and they've got a procedure going on there. But I disagree with that we're only targeting the criminals. We haven't seen that borne out based on only going after these people that are necessarily violent. And if they did commit a crime in another country, that should be necessarily, I guess, adjudicated in the other country, but we don't hold them responsible here for it per se. I mean, I understand where you're going with that. Do
you want somebody that's a convicted murderer in another country present in the United States, even if they haven't murdered here?
Well, again, it depends on what the crime is, because you started off with the idea of just a crime, and now we've gone to murder. There's a whole lot of breadth in between the two spaces there, and we could say something like this person has committed a crime in this country, and thus a means for deportation, but we don't have to define the crime. So I understand the issue in the moment, but I think that it's a little too black and white when there's a lot more gray in there, personally.
Congressman, go ahead, Congressman.
No, I was just going to say, I'm going to go back to the numbers that ICE released last summer, which is that we've got 13,000 people illegally present in the United States with homicide convictions from other countries.
That's Congressman Gabe Evans, Congressional District 8. You've been very generous with your time. Final question, Congressman. The use of National Guard, of threatening to use the Marines, do you think justified in this case?
Well, again, National Guard, that's, a fairly typical use for National Guard is when a civil disturbance, unrest, something like that has either exceeded the scope of local law enforcement's ability to handle, or in the case of, places like California where they let their city burn in 2020 and they're a loud and vociferous sanctuary state and sanctuary city that's clearly not committed to the rule of law. Making sure that we have the appropriate resources, if the state won't do it from the federal perspective, to ultimately accomplish the goal of the United States, which is to protect the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for the citizens and the residents of the community. And so I think in this particular situation, again, there's a long history of National Guard being activated for things like this. And so to be able to activate the National Guard, if you have a governor and mayor who are sanctuary city and state defund the police apologists and who aren't going to keep their community safe, absolutely the federal government is going to protect their citizens when the state and the city won't.
And I think especially after 2020 and the damage and the weeks that went on where that took place, the American people aren't willing to put up with it anymore and are going to side with President Trump in this case. Gabe Evans, thank you so much for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show this morning.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Always enjoy being on with you guys.
That's Congressman Gabe Evans representing Congressional District 8, which is the north part of Denver. What'd you think of what he had to say? Join the conversation. Unlike other radio programs out there, this is not a monologue. It's not just a podcast interview. You get to be a part of the conversation. Did you appreciate what Gabe Evans had to say? Would you like to challenge him? Phone line is open, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Just wrapped up a great conversation with Representative Gabe Evans. They are two different things we talked about. First was a Intelligence Committee meeting that's going to take place Wednesday of this week. It is the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence. They are launching a investigation into the heightened threat of anti-Semitic terrorist attacks in the United States in the wake of the recent attacks in Washington, D.C. and Boulder. And Bill, great point. It's also happening on the right. And it needs to be confronted on the right as well. And anytime I've watched, whether it's Candace Owens or others, it's weird, like bizarre, kind of like one-off historical references.
Yeah.
So it's like, did you know that in 1843 on the beaches of some faraway land, a Jews killed an innocent Christian? And you're like, oh, okay. So it's like kind of bizarrely ahistorical. And then what it seems to me is to fall into the same, what I call Marxist trope that a lot of the left falls into, which is Jews are successful. Jews are the oppressors. And that oppressed mindset, it's the first page of the Communist Manifesto. So if you look at Jews and go, well, they're successful people oppressing other people, then you've fallen right into the same Marxist tropes that everybody else has fallen into. So that's why I think it needs to be rejected. Jews are successful not because they're oppressors, but because their culture lends itself to successful living. They are religious people. They strengthen family. They build businesses. That lends itself to success in culture.
Yeah,
and then you blame them as being oppressors.
I'm just worried about the what Candace Owens has been saying recently, and some of the guests. Again, I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is anti-Semitic, but he's had several guests on his podcast that are absolutely anti-Semitic. One of them saying that Winston Churchill was the villain inside of World War II.
Yeah, that was stupid.
Yeah. And again, and Rogan just lets it go, and that's kind of the problem on the inside, is that even by letting that go,
but he invited people on that critiqued him for letting it go.
Yeah, but the idea is just letting it go, not giving any sort of pushback or anything else. And the idea is,
live during the interview, he didn't do the direct pushback,
not at all.
But he did have people on the pushback later.
Yeah, I know, but remember this: there's the rule. How many people and this is a newspaper rule, how many people read the original headline and article versus how many of them read the correction? And that's the problem. Is that's the same thing that happens in podcast, and honestly, same thing that happens right here in radio. Same thing happens. Many people hear the first story and don't actually hear the follow-up correction or the second side of it. And I think that this does lead a lot as far as the left coming out of the war and what's going on as far as what's happening in Gaza. Is Israel has come in at times and used a sledgehammer when a scalpel may work out better. And in my mind, it's been difficult for them to justify the blockade of some medical and food supplies. I have a hard time with some of the justification on the continued blockade for that. I'm not certain that I would be able to spread out, the food and things the way that it should be, or that I should be put in charge of it. I'm not asking for that, but it concerns me as far as how that food distribution and aid distribution is going. And I believe that how it's being done leads to people being able to say, look at the horrible way the Jews are treating these people. They're no good because when given the power, this is how they act. I think those statements are wrong, but I can see why they would be emotionally persuasive, because if you show people pictures of starving mothers and kids and people that have been injured and lost family members.
And Greta Thunberg picked up in a flotilla.
Yeah. And so that's the problem is I've just got that. I think that it's allowing space for rising anti-Semitism based on that conversation where there are people there. We saw it. We saw videos we played. People chanting from the river to the sea, and they have no idea what it means. But it's sure catchy when you're in a big crowd and you think that you're chanting for freedom, not understanding you're chanting for the genocide of the Jewish people. You're telling them that Israel should not exist, that it needs to be wiped off the planet, and you are cheering that. So, yeah, there are some problems there of some of these people, I think, being slowly persuaded and not understanding what they're getting into based on emotionally getting tied up in some pictures and some statements. Yeah, it's hard.
Also, let's talk Los Angeles. I found it interesting, and I did not know this, that the primary objectives of ICE and the federal immigration officials was to pick up people with criminal backgrounds in the original raid that kicked off the LA riots. Because I thought this was a pivot. I was like, oh, they're just going after places where there's lots of illegal immigrants, which I applauded. Because in my mind, I mean, you've been warned enough. You've broken a law. This is not, we played this game for 25 years of live quietly and clean people's houses and pick up dirty dishes at restaurants or whatever. Just live quietly. Be an illegal immigrant in America. We did that for 25 years, and it resulted in millions of people coming to this country illegally. And then the financial burden that brought upon our communities. I mean, Denver's now literally putting American citizens on furlough to cover the costs it required to care for the illegal immigrants in our community. So it was an experiment, but it was an experiment that failed. And I thought that was the impetus of the riots. Oh, now Trump's going after just random illegals. Good. He should go after them because you've been warned enough. You were given a plane ticket and $1,000 to get out of this country. You gotta go. And this isn't punishment in the sense that no one's imprisoning you. They're just asking you to get out of this country and come here and do it the right way. But I found it intriguing that Gabe Evans was saying that, no, the federal law enforcement was going after people with criminal backgrounds. And an important reminder that just because they don't commit a crime here in America doesn't mean they weren't criminals in other countries to begin with. So, what do you think? Join the conversation, 303-696-1971, or text us at the Dan Caplis Law text line, 720-819-5115. Do you like the fact that Trump's keeping immigration focused on just criminals? Do you want to see it expanded? Or maybe you're an open border person. I get those messages all the time. To Jesus, no one's illegal. Join the conversation. Let's go to the phone lines. Joe Arvada. Good morning, Joe. You're on with Jeff and Bill.
Morning.
Morning, Jeff, Billy. Look, we all knew what Donald Trump ran on. Nobody can argue. He didn't say just the criminal. He said first their focus will be on criminal illegals. And it is. And let's not forget, as you've all pointed out, the first crime was coming across the border. But let's not fool ourselves, Billy. There's a lot of these folks that have multiple crimes. I think another thing that should be happening is that every person that came across the border should be background checked to see if they voted, because that's another crime. And I'm sorry, it is destructive and violent for my voting rights. So I would say that's another list that needs to be deported right away. If you voted, you got your voting rights. The Biden administration made sure you got your vote, you got your registration. So that just because you got your registration, you knew it was illegal, and you voted, you should be deported too for that immediately. And here's another thing. The idea that a mayor can get on there, remember how President Trump said peacefully protest. He told don't riot, go and peacefully protest. That's not what I hear out of these people. I hear them complaining that Trump is doing illegal actions. This is wrong, getting posse comitatus in our country. We should do something. In other words, You're instigating the riot, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom. And you want to know what'll stop some of that? Arrest Karen Bass. That would stop some of this instigation.
Yeah, to be fair, though, Joe, that Donald Trump during that same speech said if you have to fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And you have to fight for the country, and you have to fight for the country. He said fight 21 times. I understand going back to the one time he said peaceful, but I've outlined this on the show numerous times. If your son, daughter, niece, nephew, grandson, granddaughter came to you with an essay and it said peaceful once and then said fight 21 times, the theme behind it is not peaceful. But continue,
yeah,
go
except
on.
You're forgetting something.
Yeah.
You're forgetting something.
What?
The protesters in the Trump case were citizens. These are not. You do not have a right to come here and throw a riot in the streets.
How many people
if you're
in LA?
An illegal alien.
How many people involved in that LA riot were illegal, Joe?
Most of them.
How do you know?
Well, do you want to take a poll?
No, Joe, I didn't ask. I want to know how you know. You just said they
Because
are.
I know.
How?
That's why you have me
Joe?
on.
No, Joe. How? How did you divine
large
this?
brain size.
No. What
here
information
Joe
did you
on
have?
our data.
What information did you have that they're all
brain.
illegal? What information?
There you go.
Or are you drawing assumptions? You're just drawing assumptions
No,
because the color of their
it's
skin and the
the
flags they're waving.
intellect, Billy.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
the intellect.
Yeah, sure.
There's a million.
Some
Think
people
about
call it
this.
stereotypes.
There's a million. Okay, well, ask yourself this question, Billy.
Others will
How
call it
many
prejudice.
of the 1 million illegal aliens? Everybody knows that there's at least 1 million in California. How many of the million were out there on the streets? Huh?
I don't know. Neither do you, Joe.
Well,
and that's
take
the
a
issue.
poll.
That's my
Go
issue,
ahead.
Joe. I know,
Get your
but
poll
guess
working.
what? Guess what, Joe? Though you made and I appreciate the phone call. Thank you. And you made the assertion that they are without having any knowledge. That's okay. But that's on you, not on us.
I don't know, Bill. The idea that those are American citizens
No, the issue
out
is
there with their Mexican flags burning things
the
down.
issue, but the idea of that they're
Seems
all.
like a stretch.
Here's the thing: how many of them had Mexican flags?
I have no idea.
Again,
I don't know how many people
here's
were
the idea, though.
protesting,
I know,
but it seems like there's a lot.
Here's the idea, though. The idea is, these people were protesting, and they all were out there with their Mexican flags, but we don't know how many of them had Mexican flags. So they couldn't have all been out there with their Mexican flags, and we have no idea how many of them were illegal, but because they were out there and some of them had Mexican flags, now they're all
we can
illegal.
tell you what the issue was over.
I'm not arguing the issue. What I'm arguing is the assumption that because I see people with dark skin waving a Mexican flag in this protest, they're obviously illegals. I
But
disagree
Bill, what was
with
the
that.
protest over?
Treatment of immigrants as far as ICE.
And deportations. Just
Yes.
treatment? It was just a debate over
Well,
treatment?
here's the thing
No,
is,
it was a-
hang on a second.
it
You've talked
was
to,
a-
but you've
it was
talked
over
to
deportation.
You talked to a lot of what are American citizens down near our capital talking about deportation and treatment of American citizens.
Yeah.
Those people aren't illegal, but just because they came
weren't
out to a protest,
burning things either.
But hang on, just because they showed up at a protest and say that's the reason they're there doesn't make them illegal, nor does it make them a criminal. But yet we're assuming they all are. That's where I'm pushing back.
But we're not saying that all of them are, but those that
That's
were
what-
burning cars.
That's what
and
Joe said.
Throwing things, yes,
Joe
they are.
said
and
that. That's what Joe
and I think
said.
it's just common sense.
That's
to think that
what
they're illegal
Joe
immigrants.
said. No, it's a stereotype.
No, it's not. They're
Yes,
out
it
there.
is.
Are they out there with their UK flags?
It's
their
a
Australian
stereotype.
flags.
It's a stereotype to assume
Their
they're all
Chinese
illegal.
flags. I didn't see Chinese flags.
It's a stereotype to assume they're all illegal. Again, make whatever stereotype you
All
want,
right.
make whatever assumption you want, but that's okay.
We got
Just don't assume that it's true.
Not little Dutch girls out protesting. All right, let's go to a break. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We're talking the riots that took place in Los Angeles. Now, Bill, radical kind of left groups are planning anti-ICE, quote, emergency protests, unquote, in Aurora tonight outside the ICE facility and in Denver tomorrow at the state capitol. Look, last time there were BLM riots, no one really got in trouble. There were some trespassing curfew tickets. A lot of those got dismissed. And then they sued the police and got a settlement. So is all of the incentive on the side of the protesters just go out there and create some chaos the next 2 nights?
No, I don't think so because, one, it's a little bit of a different situation. And I believe that Trump is itching to use the military in this manner. Hegseth is already offering Marines. No, I don't anticipate this getting that violent or spreading across the country because I believe that it was in reaction to something that happened inside of Los Angeles, and I don't think that we have the same viral type moment that we did with George Floyd, where people saw the videos, there were people standing around. That video went viral as far as how he was treated, and we're not going to argue about what happened, etc. But just the visual. We don't have a visual here. We don't necessarily, the visuals that are dominant are the protests. So if we had a visual of ICE coming in and arresting a couple of people and beating a grandmother, then you might have something. But we don't have something on that level visually, so I don't think so. I think there are going to be actors across the country that are going to try to get this into violence, but I am very, very, very skeptical that the vast majority of the people that are going to show up for these protests are really itching for that kind of violence. But, so we can go back to what MLK Jr. said. Violence is language of the unheard. So some of this violence may not necessarily be about ICE per se, which is some of what we saw in the Rodney King riots in L.A. Same thing. That wasn't necessarily about Rodney King. So that could be it as well, is there could be some other people there.
I was fascinated in that riot how much it was really about, and I've watched documentaries, the frustration between blacks and Koreans.
Well, blacks, Koreans, blacks, the police, the socioeconomic society, it was everything. It was just tensions that boiled over. There were so many things that were layers there.
Do you think you'll see Mike Johnston and Jared Polis come out and say, stop rioting, stop burning police cars?
I think that would have to happen first because they can't tell you to stop until you do
right.
it.
But, do you think they would push back, or you think you'd see kind of a Gavin Newsom
the thing for me is,
response?
I don't think the people of Denver are going to do that. I can be completely and totally wrong. I just don't think that that's where we're going with this. So I'm not necessarily concerned about it. I would hope they would come out and say, yes, calmer heads and things like that. But that's what politicians always say. They always
Now, I've been a part of a number of these
should.
progressive protests the last few months, and they really haven't been that violent. So to your point, it may not get as violent here in Denver. We seem to have a little different breed of leftists, but I could be wrong. Be careful out there tonight and tomorrow night. All right, we'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is 710 KNUS.